These are video notes to help out with some angle vocabulary. The specific words we're going to be looking at are adjacent, vertical, complementary, and supplementary. We'll start off with a few definitions, and then we'll look at how to use those. So our first word that we have is adjacent. And two adjacent angles just mean that they're two angles that are directly next to each other. So you could, if you're sitting next to your friend at lunch, say that you are adjacent to your friend. A picture to show that, if I have two angles that share a common ray, so they have the same vertex and they have this same ray that they share, these two angles right here are going to be adjacent to each other. Next vocab word that we have is vertical. And vertical just means that your two angles are opposite of each other when you have two intersecting lines. So if I have two lines that look like this, one pair of vertical angles would be this one and this one. Notice how they're opposite of each other and there is an angle in between them. So in blue, those are vertical. I could also say that this top and this bottom angle are vertical because they are also opposite of each other. Okay, next we have complementary. Complementary means that you have two angles that add up to 90 degrees or two angles that form a right angle. So there's a 90-degree right angle, and then this 90-degree angle might be split into two complementary angles. And then finally, supplementary is when you have two angles that add up to 180 degrees. So 180 degrees would be a straight angle, just like this, and then that might be split into two angles, so that would be supplementary angles. As a quick kind of memory way to memorize this, complementary, we have a C, and supplementary, we have an S. So if I take each of those letters, I can actually turn them into the number that they represent. So complementary adds up to 90. We can make it 90 degrees just like that. And supplementary adds up to 180 degrees just like that. So if that at all helps you remember, you can use that trick. All right, we're going to start off with some notation on how to label different angles. The first thing that I want you to know is that symbol right like that. It looks kind of like a less than symbol, but that symbol actually means angle. So instead of writing the word angle every time I want to label it, I can just use that symbol instead. In this, we're going to label two pairs of adjacent and two pairs of vertical angles. So I'll put adjacent over here and my vertical angles over here. Now I'm just looking for pairs of angles, so I can start pretty much wherever I want. There's going to be a lot of different options, but I'm just going to pick a few to label. So adjacent, if I just pick any angle, maybe this one, I would label that as angle VW X. So I started here at V, went down to W, and then over to X. That angle is adjacent to each of these on the side. I'm just going to pick one of them, and I'm going to pick ZWV. Those two angles are adjacent to each other. So ZWV. That's one pair of adjacent angles. If I want to do a second pair of adjacent angles, maybe I'll use this one to start. So that could be either ZWY or YWZ. Either one would work. And then an angle that's adjacent to that, maybe I'll use this one. There are two. I'm just picking that one. So XWY would be the second one. Okay, then for my vertical angles, those are my ones that are opposite of each other. So I can use XWY, so angle XWY. That one I only have one option. That's going to be vertical to ZWV. Angle ZWV. And then the second set of vertical on this one, I can use maybe the top and bottom one instead of left and right. So VWX, and angle ZWY. So again, I'm kind of just picking some. There are other options, especially for the adjacent ones. But notice, to answer this question in your homework, I have 4 angles listed under adjacent, 2 sets of 2, 4 angles listed under vertical, again, 2 sets of 2. And the final thing that I want you to notice is that the middle letter in all of these is going to be the same because that represents the vertex. The vertex always has to be your middle letter when you're labeling your angles. All right, next, tell whether the angles are adjacent or vertical, and then find the value of x. So for the first one, these two share a common ray. So those are next to each other, so I'm going to write that those are adjacent. Okay, they also form a straight line, so they're also supplementary, but right now it's just asking about adjacent. Okay, these two, since they do form a straight line, I'm going to set them up so that when I add them, they equal 180 degrees. Remember, 180 degrees would represent a straight angle. Then from there, I can subtract 85 from both sides. So this would be my 0 pair, and I'm left with x equals 95 degrees. And then I could label that up here in my picture. Be sure for all of the problems in your notes that you are including the diagram with it so that you have a visual to go along with your work. It'll be a lot more helpful than just the work. All right, second one, these two angles are opposite of each other. So I'm going to label those ones as vertical. And when I have vertical angles, those are always going to be congruent to each other. So that means they're going to be equal. And I could just write down that x equals 90 degrees, since this is 90 degrees right there. And then I'll also add the degree symbol. Okay, and for the third one, these two are next to each other, so they are adjacent. They are also supplementary, but I'm just going to worry about that word for now. And it shows that they add up to 90 degrees. So in my equation, I'm just going to take each of my two terms, put an addition sign in between, and then set it equal to 90 degrees. Okay, now we'll go ahead and combine like terms. So 69 minus 1 is 68. And I still have positive 2x equals 90. Then we'll subtract 68 from each side. So this is my 0 pair. And I'll have 2x equals 22. And then finally, divide both sides by 2 to get x equals 11. And now I can use 11 back up in the picture. So right here, 2x, 2 times 11 is 22. And 22 minus 1 equals 21. So that angle is 21 degrees. And that would make sense because those two numbers together are going to add up to 90. Okay, next we're going to look at definitions for complementary and supplementary. Remember, we're looking for either 90 degrees or 180 degrees. So in each of these, I'm just going to add up the two numbers that I see and then decide which one applies. So 26 plus 64, that adds up to 90 degrees. So I would write that these are complementary. For the second one, I'm going to add 136 plus 44, and that adds up to 180 degrees, which tells me that they are supplementary. And for my third example, I'm going to add 70 plus 19, which gets to 89. And that is not either of those, so I would write down neither. One quick distinction, sometimes having this gap in between throws people off. Even though they're not adjacent to each other, they can still be complementary. So it doesn't necessarily have to touch like that to be one or the other. All right, and for our final examples, again, be sure you copy down the diagram, tell whether they are complementary or supplementary, and then find the value of x. So first picture, these two form a straight line, so they are supplementary, and that means that they add up to 180 degrees. So I'm just going to take each of my two terms, this term and this term, we're going to add them and set it equal to 180 degrees. So when I write my equation, I'll just have 4x plus 5 plus 41 equals 180. And then I can solve from there. So my two constant terms, positive 5 and positive 41, are going to add up to 46. And then I can bring down 4x plus 46 equals 180. And then I'll subtract 46 from each side. So that's my zero pair. And then 180 minus 46 will be 134. And then I'll divide by 4 on each side. So 134 would be in the box, 4 on the outside. 4 goes into 14 3 times. And then this is where I'll add a decimal point so I can bring down the 0 and make that 20. So I'm going to get a final value of 33.5. And then looking back at the picture, if I want to find the measure of that angle, 4 times 33.5 is 134. And 134 plus 5 is 139 degrees. So looking at these two together, they should add up to 180, and they do. So it's kind of a good check to make sure that you've got what you need. Okay, and final example for the video. These two angles form a 90-degree angle, so they are complementary. So I'm going to add them together and get 90 degrees. So when I write my equation, I'll have x plus 2x minus 3 equals 90. And then we can go ahead and combine. X plus 2x is 3x. And then we'll add 3 to each side. So 3x equals 93. And then we'll divide each side by 3 to get a value of 31. And then looking back at the picture, this angle would be 31 degrees since that is equal to x. That tells me I also need an angle measurement on my answer, or degree. And then if I do 2 times 31, that's going to be 62. And 62 minus 3 would be 59 degrees. And then again, I can look at 31 and 59 together and see that that does equal 90. All right, thank you for watching examples on complementary, supplementary, adjacent, and vertical, and hopefully that helps a little bit with your assignments.